If you ever had a passing interest in baseball, I'm willing to bet you know who Ichiro Suzuki is. If not, I'd like you to show me the rock you've been living under for the past 20 years, please. Ichiro is one of, if not the, greatest contact hitter of all time. When he broke George Sisler's single-season hits record in 2004, he became the first player to hold the single-season hit record in 2 leagues. For nearly half a decade, no one in NPB or MLB could even touch his records. But in 2010, 2 men would make a run at his NPB record. One was the greatest contact hitter NPB had seen since Ichiro, and the other was a guy who'd been snubbed by several big league clubs who had yet to fully embrace analytics. Together, they would chase down Ichiro's record in a battle for the ages that would come down to the wire in a matchup at Meiji Jingu Stadium on October 5th, 2010. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Just who were these 2 guys? Let's start with the homegrown hero, a speedy little guy from Hyuga, Norichika Aoki, or Nori, to you and me. Nori was an above-average pitcher throughout high school, but a combination of a traumatic shoulder injury and his team never making Koshin led to Nori never really being on the radar of any NPB teams. He would enroll at Waseda University, a member of the Tokyo Big Six, and managed to make the team as a freshman outfielder, joining a stacked roster that included a lot of future NPB talent. Aoki would emerge as an elite contact hitter, being named to the Big Six Best 9 in all 3 years he was at Waseda, and he would be drafted by the Tokyo Yakult Swallows in the 4th round of the 2003 draft. After a year in the minors, he would break out in 2005. A disciple of Ichiro's shotgun hitting technique, Aoki would tear through the league's pitching in his rookie season, batting .344 and becoming the first player in Central League history to break 200 hits in a single season, breaking the previous Central League record of 192 hits held by Baystars legend Bobby Rose. He would win Rookie of the Year, make the All-Star team, and be named to the 2005 CL Best 9. He would continue to develop, focusing more on drawing walks and improving his defense than attempting to break his own record, which would fall 2 years later to his teammate Alex Ramirez. His numbers would fall further after that, thanks to an undisclosed abdominal injury in 2008. Of course, fall is relative. The man was a perennial All-Star, Best 9 member, Gold Glove recipient, and he'd been a part of both of Japan's World Baseball Classic winning teams in 2006 and 2009. Still, he was looking to bounce back and take the CL record back for himself. In completely unrelated news, the Hanshin Tigers had just signed some no-name American outfielder to replace Norihiro Akahoshi. His name? Matthew Murton. Okay, calling him no-name is a bit harsh. Murton was a top prospect when he was drafted in the 1st round of the 2003 draft by the Boston Red Sox, and he was part of the Nomar Garcia-Parra deal that sent both him and Noma to the Cubs in 2004. He'd make the Cubs roster in 2005 and showed a lot of promise, even more so when he became a full-time starter in 2006. But his numbers trailed off in 2007, and a disastrous 2008 led to a trade with the A's. But thanks to a wealth of outfield depth, the A's kind of gave up on him, and he spent a winter in Caracas before joining the Rockies in 2009, who had rebounded slightly, but he still struggled to get playing time. That's when the Tigers, fresh off losing Akahoshi and looking for a good pro-ready option, signed him for the 2010 season. Merton was expected to be a good contact bat and defensive center fielder when he was signed with the Tigers. Tigers fans were more excited for Craig Brazell, the big first baseman set to be the next Randy Bass replacement. If Murton could be above average for 2010, that'd be sufficient. The 2010 season would kick off, and Aoki would come out of the gates flying. By the end of April, he already had 40 hits, 10 of them for extra bases, and was batting .351 to kick off the season. He also drew 15 walks. In a normal year, no one would have been able to touch those numbers. And yet, Murton was. Most of the time, when a new foreign player comes into NPB, they spend much of their first month or two adjusting to the new playing style, figuring out each pitcher's stuff, getting used to the bigger strike zone, and just generally feeling things out. It usually isn't till June of their first campaign that we really see what a foreign player is capable of in NPB. But Murton bucked that trend. He wasn't held hitless until his 7th game, and he wasn't kept off base entirely until his 16th. Through his first month, he was right there with Aoki, collecting 39 hits in 2 fewer games, including this 3-run bomb off the Giants on April 8th. While Murton trailed Aoki in most major categories, it was enough that people expected Murton to keep up with or maybe even pass Aoki once he got his sea legs under him. For a new foreign player to come out of the gate that hot was almost unheard of, especially keeping pace with an established star like Aoki. It was shaping up to be an exciting battle through the season, but soon a wrench would be thrown in the works. Interleague play is usually a boom or bust time for players in both MLB and NPB. Teams aren't used to seeing each other, and the batters and pitchers don't fully know how to approach one another. It's really a crapshoot at the best of times, but Murton had one advantage that Aoki did not: the Koshin effect. For those of you who don't know, the Hanshin Tigers' home park, Koshin Stadium, is also the home of Spring and Summer Koshin, an invitational tournament and the national championship for high school baseball in Japan respectively. Said tournaments kicked the Tigers out of the stadium both in late March and late August for 2-week road trips. These road trips are known by fans as the Road of Death. And while that does give them a disadvantage, the tournament also gives them a weird advantage in a way, known as the Koshin effect. Let me explain. Every kid who grows up playing baseball in Japan wants to play at Koshin. For most, it will be the biggest stage that they could ever dream of playing on. So when a new kid makes the big team in NPB, especially one who never got to make the tournament like Aoki, they tend to be starstruck by the atmosphere and the aura the stadium gives off, finally accomplishing their dream of stepping onto that infield dirt for the first time. For most Central League players, this usually wears off after 1 or 2 series against the Tigers, and the games just become another 3-game set. Slightly more special, sure, but the mystique has subsided. Not for Pacific League players. At the time, if you played in Pacific League, you only stepped on Koshin's soil twice a year. So the effect is very much still in play. It's even more pronounced now, as with modern interleague rules, a Pacific Leaguer will only step on Koshin's soil 3 times every 2 years. And while the Tigers only went 5-6-1 at home during interleague play in 2010, they were never held off the board in any of those games. And, bar the first game against the Fighters and the last game against the Buffaloes, neither was Murton. Murton's month was on par with the start of the season. He batted .354, had an OPS of .944, and gave everything but his OBP a boost. He even hit a towering grand slam to center against the Carp on May 7th. Murton's totals now stood at 73 hits through his first 2 months. Add that to Brazil's 16 home runs, and Hanshin fans were having fantasies about another big run to the Japan series to make up for the embarrassment that was 2005. But I'll cover that one in another video. As for Nori, well, to say he had a terrible month was an understatement. Aoki would be held hitless 8 times in May, and would only strike for multiple hits 5 times. He carried an abysmal 215, 311, 278 triple slash through May, which dipped his average by 54 points to 297. And he went from leading Murton by a hit to trailing him by 16. If Nori wanted a legitimate shot at Ichiro's record, or even Ramirez's for that matter, he'd have to get his act together and fast. June would see Murton improve even more. Despite being held hitless twice early on, he kicked off an 18-game hitting streak that saw him strike for 4 hits twice. His only home run happened to be another grand slam off Hiroshima in a 13-7 slugfest. Aoki would rebound too. Despite being held off the board 3 times, he'd strike for multiple hits 13 times over 22 games, bringing him 5 hits closer to Murton by month's end. Murton and Aoki would continue their torrid pace through July. Murton basically had coin flip odds of multiple hits every game, including his July 9th matchup against the Baystars, where he clubbed 3 doubles. Aoki was doing even better. In the 19 games he'd played that month, he had multiple hits in 11 of them. He carried an average over 400 and an OPS over 1100 through July. Then it was Murton's turn to hit a roadblock. In the last 3 games set before the All-Star game, the Hiroshima Carp, presumably tired of getting beaten up on by Murton, held him hitless through all 3 games. The only thing he would do of consequence in that series was hit a sac fly for an RBI in the final game. Like most slumps, we really don't know why it happened, and we probably never will. Luckily, we had the All-Star Game series to give us a quick break. Despite his record-breaking pace, rampant Kyojin favoritism meant that Murton didn't even get voted in as a starting outfielder for the All-Star Game. However, the league selected him to make it on merit, and Murton would start in right field, right next to Aoki. August would see more of the same, with Aoki putting up a 14-game hitting streak and Murton keeping pace. By the end of the month, Murton stood at 167 hits, Aoki at 166. Murton had 30 games to go, Aoki had 28. The race was on. In the first week of September, Murton picked up 4 hits against the Bay Stars, and then another 4 against the Carp. Aoki picked up 2 hits against the Giants, suffered a rainout, then put up 6 against the Bay Stars. Murton stood at 175 hits, Aoki 174. Second week of September, Murton put up 3 hits against the Dragons, while Aoki put up 4 against the Carp, suffering another rainout. The Swallows and Tigers met for a 3-game series, and Murton picked up 6 hits while Aoki could only manage 5. So, we're right back where we started, Murton with 184 hits, and Aoki stayed one behind him with 183. Third week of September, Murton absolutely goes off, putting up 7 hits against the Bay Stars and another 6 against the Giants, including this homer. Aoki, meanwhile, brought his hit streak up to 18 games, but only picked up 4 hits against the Giants and 4 hits against the Dragons. Murton had 197 hits, Aoki 191. Now to close out September, Murton picked up 4 hits against the Dragons, 2 against the Carp, 2 against the Giants, and 2 against the Bay Stars to close out the month. Aoki looked to keep up, putting up 6 hits on the Carp, 2 on the Giants, 1 on the Dragons, 2 on the Bay Stars, and 1 on the Carp, with his hit streak climbing to 25 games. There are now 6 games left in the season. Murton stands at 207 hits, breaking the Central League record. Meanwhile, Aoki has 203. Aoki had to do something to catch Murton in these last 6 games. He couldn't afford any kind of hiccup. To start October, Murton went 0-for-3 against the Carp, then went 2-for-5. Aoki, meanwhile, tied his former teammate Ramirez with this double against the Dragons. Murton then tied Ichiro with this single, while Aoki got held hitless by the Bay Stars. All of this led to this at-bat in the top of the second inning, and this Tigers-Swallows makeup game on October 5th, 2010. To borrow a term from Secret Base, welcome to a moment in history.
この下半身がこの安定してるから脇の締まりのスイングでね非常にこの下半身と上半身が一体になってスイングできるんですね。さあどうだ日本新記録211本目のヒットマートン神宮で生まれたのは日本プロ野球新記録あのイチローを抜いた211ですよ。あのイチローを破ったマートン思わず青木も拍手。
It's almost poetic, isn't it? 2 men chasing down a record held by an all-time great, only for it to all end with one slapping a single through the infield to the other. Sometimes, sports can be beautiful like that. Murton would finish the season with 214 hits. Aoki would fall just 1 short with 209. Merton's record would only stand for 5 years, when current Cincinnati Red Shogo Akiyama beat it by hitting 216 in 2015. But unlike Murton, Akiyama didn't really have an Aoki fighting him all the way, pushing him to be better. It's those storylines that, at least in my opinion, make records like this a little bit more special. For now, Murton and Aoki sit 1 and 2 on the Central League hits leaderboard, waiting for 1, or maybe 2, players to take up the challenge and chase them down. Hey, me again. If you're looking for more NPB content on YouTube, check out the Yahoo Cosmopolitan. He helped a ton with this video and he puts out content on a much more regular basis than I do. Anyways, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Fred.